Hi there everyone, welcome to a new sort of aspect of the channel. This is going to be called Deercast Discussions.
Yep.
We're going to give you a bit of an opinion piece on head shooting, which obviously is quite a controversial topic in the world of deer stalking, and even more so now with the way that sort of game dealers and things like that are moving towards. We'll have a bit of a talk about that. So to sort of kick us off, we're going to hand you over to Tom, which was a couple of weeks ago when we were doing some head shooting in a deer park for a client of ours. So I will hand you over to Tom to kick us off.
So you're joining us. We've just headshot 3 red yearling stags. We're in a deer park here, so every year there are a certain number of the red yearlings or stags anyway that they don't want to keep, and we get called in to come and get rid of them for them, because of where they ultimately end up, and partly because they're in sort of an enclosed park. They do all have to be headshot, partly to leave cleaner carcasses, but partly don't particularly want a large number of sort of chest shot reds running around the place and causing distress for the other animals. So we've just done 3 here. I'm going to pass over to Harry in a second, who's going to talk us through the sort of special considerations we make when we are specifically head shooting animals, particularly here in a parkland setting. I know there'll be a lot of opposers to head shooting. To be honest, don't necessarily do it all the time on wild deer, but here with park deer, slightly easier, especially red deer, because I mean, just for context, the size of their heads, you do have a much bigger target, and again in a parkland setting they do just seem to be that little bit calmer and stiller. So welcome back everyone. You've just seen some footage of us in the deer park just outside Oxford, having headshot some red yearling stags, and the first thing we should say is that we don't necessarily go around head shooting everything. It's only specific deer, and under specific circumstances. I think we both sort of got requirements of when we will and won't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you talked a bit about size of deer and the different species and specifically the size of heads, and we've got a couple of examples here. We haven't got a muntjac, unfortunately. We've got some roebucks and we got a big fallow buck here, and I think it illustrates quite nicely the different size of targets, and obviously this is quite a big fallow buck, but the yearling stags that we were shooting last week were even bigger than this in terms of their heads. And so you can actually see the size of the target on this, for instance, like say a fallow buck is, you know, sort of the size of your fist almost. So if you're aiming sort of here behind the eye, directly at the brain, you've got a sort of a fist-sized target, which is, you know, a decent thing to aim at. Whereas, you know, if you look at that roe, you're literally talking the size of, you know, what, a sort of like an orange almost, or even smaller than that, like a sort of tangerine or something, which, you know, does make quite a bit of difference when you're talking about something that's constantly moving as well.
So I mean, I don't know about you, but muntjac head shooting is just a complete no for me. Partly target size, partly just the way they behave. Roe, I tend not to either. Fallow, yes, because we've got that bigger target, and the red stags we do, yes, again. But that for me, species-wise, is the only ones. And then the circumstances under which I'll do it. The regs, as we've just seen, they were in a park, so kind of contained, so if anything goes wrong, which hopefully it never does, it's kind of a controlled setting. And fallow for me is if they're out feeding, heads down, sort of very calm, not disturbed, and you can sort of really concentrate on making sure you get that right shot.
In a sort of high seat environment. Or maybe in like a sort of close quarters woodland setting, but they haven't seen you, something like that. And I think something that people don't really talk about very much, but is kind of one of the most important things for me, I think you as well, is what is the deer's head doing when you're shooting it, and you know, what is the orientation of the shot. You know, if we look at this roebuck, for instance, I personally would never shoot it side on, because the danger obviously is that the neck will go like this, and the danger is if you're aiming here and you drop the shot, you can either take the bottom of the jaw off, or, you know, if you go down and you kind of might shoot through the throat or something like that. Whereas if you take it facing towards you or facing away from you, ideally that's an ideal shot, then you're directly in the back of the head. If you go a bit high, you know, you might clip the antlers or something like that, but or if it's a doe you won't, but the deer probably will be absolutely fine. Or if you drop it down, then that's a high or a low neck shot, which is ideal. So I personally will only shoot deer when they're either facing directly away from me, including the body, because obviously the neck can do sort of strange things, so you want to have them completely in line, or facing completely away from you. Like you say, when a deer is feeding and it's facing directly away from you and it puts its head up to have a look somewhere, and it'll pause for that sort of 5-10 seconds, maybe it's looking at something, that is when I would do it. But I think it's all about being comfortable, isn't it, really?
It is, and I'd say me, never beyond 100 metres. Anything further than that, if there's a deer in the right shot, I'll just shoot it. So I don't know if you've got sort of similar distance parameters.
Absolutely. Or if it's a follow-up on something, then you know you're talking about a slightly different situation. But typically in the wild, I wouldn't really head shoot unless, like you say, it's quite close quarters. It's not my preferred way of doing it. I don't really like doing it. I find it quite sort of stressful. And it's, you know, a lot about confidence. You have confidence in your rifle, in the setup, in where you are, in yourself. So if it's kind of mid-season, I've had quite a few deer or something like that, and I'm feeling confident in myself and the rifle and the zero and everything. That's another thing to talk about is caliber. We had a bit of a discussion about this, and loopy calibers versus flat calibers. And we both now use a light 308.
Which is, in my rifle, pretty much flat to about 200 metres, but as in flat literally from the point it comes out the barrel. So even if you're under 100 metres, because I was using some 150 grain stuff before that dropped about 4 inches at 200 metres, but was also 2 inches low, I think, at 50 metres. So there's quite a big, if you kind of put that on a piece of paper where the bullet may land, that was quite a big spread. And again, if you overlaid that on a deer, you could be anywhere from the top of the head to down to kind of mid-neck, which just wasn't really for me, whereas the other stuff is pretty much flat from the minute it comes out the barrel to almost 200 metres, so it gives me that confidence to do it.
Exactly, and I think for me the elevation is obviously important, but it's not as important as the horizontal, because if you're talking about the horizontal, and again, if you're shooting a deer like that or like that, if you're a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, especially if you're neck shooting, you run the risk of paralysing and clipping a bit of spine or scuffing the deer. So I will typically only do it if I'm really sturdy off sticks at quite close quarters, or ideally when I'm in the high sea I've actually got a bipod and I get really, really sturdy, and that is perfect. So I will do it off that. But
the sticks is kind of a key element to it as well, I think, in that we were both head shooting some of the red stags probably last year before, just off normal quad sticks, whereas now have attached the Viperflex 5th leg to our various sets of sticks, and that I think does give you a hell of a lot more confidence, because it's just such a stable platform, isn't it? And it just removes another element of something where it could potentially go wrong in terms of wobble or anything like that.
It's absolutely rock solid. I mean, go and watch our video on the Viperflex 5th leg, and you can actually see you know, how sturdy it makes the sticks. It's rock solid at the front. You've got that back support. You know, I wouldn't do it off normal quad sticks now, or well, I don't use those Primos things, but I can't imagine that'd be that easy off that. But it's all about confidence. You know, if you're confident in your ability, in your setup, then that's fine. That's what we've found works for us. It's just about eliminating, you know, any sort of variable really, and just having such a really controlled environment. But I mean, in an ideal world, we wouldn't really head shoot at all.
No, and we were both saying earlier before doing this video that it's the outside pressures that are sort of encouraging people to do it, and it's slightly worrying to some degree. I mean, our local game dealer, we won't name and shame, but there was certainly a point during this year, and I can't remember if they are still now, but we'll only take headshot deer, which I think, I'm not saying we're any better than the average deer stalker, but the average deer stalker out there is probably then looking at it going, well, I'm going to have to head shoot everything, even if I'm not necessarily confident or comfortable in doing it. And I think it's just slightly sending the wrong message out there in terms of encouraging people to do something that isn't necessarily right under every circumstance, as we've just discussed.
I mean we understand they're probably beholden to a supermarket that says, you know, we can't have any contamination in the carcass or whatever, so you know, I don't think we can place all the blame on game dealers necessarily, but it's having that financial incentive to head shoot something that I think but doesn't really sit right with either of us. So we will only do it if we necessarily have to, and in very controlled setting.
Yeah, and I can see why they would want headshot stuff. Because I mean, we both butcher our own deer and sell our own deer, and there is undoubtedly a cleaner carcass when you head shoot something, and undoubtedly you do get a little bit more meat out of it because you've got either little bit of the shoulder or the ribs damaged. So I can see there's probably a little bit of a better margin in it for everybody, but it's just knowing that sometimes money's not the be all and end all, is it?
No, I think in a way the sort of copper and lead argument comes into it, because if you're a supermarket, say, and you say, oh, we're only going to have headshot, then that eliminates almost the copper, the toxic, because I mean, copper is a toxic metal. It's just not as bad as lead. So it's still not ideal to have something that's chest shot with anything really. If you're a supermarket, if you're a butcher, etc., if you're processing it. So like you say, and it does create a lovely, clean, beautiful carcass. There's no mess, no blood meat. And so, if you don't go out in the field and you haven't seen the risks and all that, and the sort of humane aspect of it, then I can understand from their perspective that that's what they're going to want. But it does put deer stalkers in quite a difficult position, I think. Increasingly now, more so than ever.
And I think we're partly guilty of it ourselves as deer stalkers. In that, I mean, if you look on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, there is plenty of footage out there of deer stalkers, not sort of bragging, but showing footage and photos and bits and pieces of them having headshot something. And I think it again just adds to that snowball effect of creating hype around a subject or a topic, that then more and more people start to think it's acceptable and it's the thing to do.
Yeah, there's almost like a sort of kudos around it, I think, where people go, oh, I headshot this at such range. That's it's not really nothing to really shout about, I don't think, necessarily. But I mean, we'd be very interested in your thoughts and opinions on it as well, because obviously it's a big debate. This is just our, very kind of layman's, I suppose. Yeah,
our ramblings,
ramblings.
Feel free to disagree with us.
Exactly, we're not the authority on this at all. No. We're not professional deer stalkers, like you say. We're just sort of, part-time deer stalkers, like the majority of people. So yeah, we'd be really interested to hear your thoughts. So do leave them down in the comments. But thank you very much for joining us on this first Deercast discussions. Like I say, let us know your comments, anything else you'd like us to talk about. Very happy to, and like, comment and subscribe.
Thank you.